Hello, this is Diane Mourglia-Swerdlow with another podcast for expansions.com. Stewart is still in Australia, down under, so while he's there, I'm holding down the fort here, and I have a few very interesting stories to tell you. It's been an exciting week, let me tell you. I want to start off with, of course, extending my sympathies to those who have gone through the typhoon storm in the Philippines. Hayden is, I guess, the way you say the name, reminds me of the Hadron Collider in Switzerland, so think about that. This was supposed to be one of the worst storms ever. I've heard it called worse than hell, and apparently there are up to 10,000 missing and or dead. So again, our sincere sympathies go out to those in the Philippines or who have relatives in the Philippines. In Los Angeles, as you know, this past week, Southern California, well, this article is out of Los Angeles, Southern California, from Santa Barbara to San Diego. Residents reported seeing a fireball that went across the sky, and of course the forecasters are telling you that it is a meteor. So you want to watch for that one. And this comes on the heel of the LAX shooter, Paul Shianka. I don't know how you say his name either, but somebody pointed out CIA, then dash in dash CIA, CIA and CIA. So I thought that was interesting. So all of these things are kind of happening together. Now, with that said, the other interesting thing that came across my desk this week is the Hollow Earth. Now, Stewart's True World History book, Humanity's Saga, is in the process finally of getting laid out for Kindle and for in print. And it is our hopes that this will be available to you by the middle of December. So we're still tweaking that a little bit, but it's coming along really great. And when I found this article, I wanted to share it with you because one of the things that I did not know, speaking of comets, was that Edmund Halley, who is actually the discoverer of Halley's Comet, proposed that the Earth was hollow and could in fact support life inside of it, and this was in the 1600s. Then followed by that, Leonard Euler, who is or was a Swiss mathematician and physicist, also suggested that the Earth was hollow and could support life inside of that. Followed by Captain John Sims, who served in the U.S. War of 1812, who supported the theory of the hollow Earth, and he volunteered to explore inside of it. And most of you by now are familiar with Colonel Richard Byrd, who in the 40s said that the Earth was convex rather than concave, which is what Leonard Euler, the Swiss mathematician and physicist, proposed. Apparently, according to Admiral Byrd, because the Earth was convex, that planes could float right into the center of the Earth, and that upon his arrival to the South Pole, he claims that he was greeted by a flying machine and beings that told him that they were concerned about nuclear developments and things that were going on the surface. He also claimed that there was a central sun and that life existed within the hollow planet. Now, adding to the mystery is that he had a son of the same name, but he was a junior. He accompanied Admiral Byrd on these missions until he was 6 years old. And at some point in time, it didn't say in this particular article, the son was found mysteriously dead in a warehouse, and nobody can explain why. Now, the other thing that this article goes on to say is that there are still more theories that are coming out about the Earth's core, and the latest one was proposed on July 13th. That one did not have to do about the hollow Earth, but again, this is the shift in thought of this is what it is, and now we're not so sure, and then who knows what's going to be next on the list. So that's coming down the pike more and more. Keep your eyes open. And along the same veins, there was an article that said that ancient Antarctica's forests featured weird trees, and wood fossils show this. Now, I found this interesting because basically Antarctica is covered by snow, so how did they find these wood fossils? And when I was on Antarctica, of course, only the tip on that peninsula that sticks out where they will let the tourists go, there wasn't really not wood there. There was a lot of rocks, and even the penguins built their nests out of rocks, but no wood. So anyway, this is what they're telling us now about Antarctica. Now, in another vein, Rachel Poole, some of you may have heard about this story. She was the pregnant wife who was brutally stabbed at home as her soldier husband watched on. Now, from his post overseas, the thing that I wanted to bring forward, and of course these are things that I don't even like to talk about, but because I have been telling you about how bloody that the scenes are being shown across the internet, and I really believe that these are being shown to imprint you and to activate ritual programming and triggering, that I want to tell you this is the way that people's minds are fragmented and the things that are done in programming. They show you pictures or things where you can't do anything about this. And this has now been broadcast, what happened to this man. His wife fought back. She was able to name her attacker. He was able to get help from afar. But what a horrible, traumatizing experience to be so far away and not be able to help the ones that you love. So I can't help but think this was part of his programming. And of course, again, my sympathies go on to the family. The last I heard, the baby was fine and the wife is recovering, although it's going to be a slow go for her. Continuing on. The Senate has approved a bill that legalizes sodomy and bestiality in the U.S. military. Now, I told you that the next trend is going to be to legalize bestiality. You may wonder how this is happening and why. Well, apparently, the Senate Armed Services Committee unanimously approved S. 1867, which is the National Defense Authorization Act, which includes a provision to repeal Article 125 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Apparently, this states that any person subject to this chapter who engages in unnatural carnal copulation with another person of the same or opposite sex or with an animal is guilty of sodomy. Penetration, however slight, is sufficient to complete the offense. This also includes any person found guilty of sodomy shall be punished as a court-martial may direct. Now, this law has now been repealed. Former Army Colonel Bob McGinnis said some military lawyers have indicated that bestiality may be prosecutable under another section of the Military Code of Justice called the catch-all, which is Article 134 for offenses against good military order and discipline. However, Army Colonel Bob McGinnis added, soldiers, unfortunately, like it or not, have engaged in this type of behavior in the past. Will they in the future if they remove this statute? I don't know. So again, they're encroaching upon what we consider to be moral, ethical, and decent. The next thing I want to tell you about, Jamie Alexander. Now, I don't really know who Jamie Alexander is. Maybe you do. But she was put all over the internet. Apparently, it's the Thor premiere. So, and I have watched the first Thor movie, which I liked. And probably watched the second one. They want to know if her outfit is the most daring ever. Because this one cuts down the front. And she almost looks totally naked except for a little tiny bit of material over the side of her breasts and over her private parts. So we'll post the link and you can take a look and see what you think on that one. But again, I told you this also a long time ago. They're cutting out bits and pieces until they basically are showing naked people, and you're going to be used to it because you've seen bits and pieces, and of course you know what the whole thing looks like. So that's what they're going for. Then, of course, we have snakes. What could we do? Have a podcast without snakes? We need Stewart here for this. It's just not as much fun. There is a pastor in Tennessee who has been charged for keeping dangerous wildlife in his home, and he belongs to a church in Tennessee that practices snake handling. Now, this is always in the news. And how do they put it more in the news? By arresting the guy, or at least taking his 50 poisonous snakes and putting him all over the internet. So again, you have it in your mind about religion and reptilians. Keeping that in mind, what about reptilians and spa treatments? Now, I have told you about snake massages that have gained popularity, especially in Asia. We have also talked about people who get their pedicures done by fish that nibble at your toes. Now, it sounds interesting. The only thing is that, let's see, let me find my facts here, that health experts have warned people that fish spa pedicures actually can spread diseases such as HIV and hepatitis C. So with that in mind, now the new spa treatment is pencil-sized eels. And, of course, you're supposed to, I guess, swim with these eels. And if you have loose-fitting swimsuits, beware. Because in one case, a stray eel found its way through the man's genitals into his kidney, and he ended up needing a 3-hour operation. So you want to be careful about what you do, and just because somebody else is doing it doesn't mean you have to do it. Be aware of what's going on out there, but you don't have to participate. I also want to talk to you about twiblings. That's right, twiblings. This apparently is a new term that is being applied to twins who may or may not have the same mother and or father implanted in somebody's womb. Because with all the IVF procedures that are going on out there, as well as surrogates and God knows what other way of conceiving, that it used to be, of course, a twin was the eggs from the same mother and the sperm from the same father, or the egg would split from the mother and be fertilized by 2 sperm from the same father. Well, now we don't really even know who the mothers are, because the eggs could come from someplace else, the sperm can come from someplace else, it could be 1 father, 2 father, who knows. So apparently the new term is twiblings. And while I was researching this, I found something that was kind of disturbing to me. It was about 2 twins who were separated at birth. They were given up for adoption. This is the thing that kind of got me. Apparently, it says that they were purposefully separated at birth. It says researchers did this. And this is so that they could participate in a secret research study on nature versus nurture in identical twin siblings. Finally, at age 35, one twin was allowed to find her birth mother when the adoption agency told her she had a twin, which she never knew about, but the researchers did. So now, doesn't this sound like a Nazi experiment to you? It does to me. Then she contacted the twin, and again, they're trying to figure out their life together. But I just think this is interesting. And going back to Stewart's book, I'm going to drop just a little hint. Those of you who may have seen our True World History DVDs, which are now available to you as a gold member in our gold member section, it's included there. We have talked about perhaps Jesus, aka Emmanuel, being a twin, which may perhaps be why Nazis and the Illuminati are so fascinated with twins. So that's a little hint for you. Speaking of twins, I want to kind of segue into the next story, because I've talked to you about this before, the true reality of sexuality that Stewart and I have done. And of course, as you know, with everything that's going on in the world right now, the world is bringing up a lot of sexual activity for a variety of purposes, and the main one, of course, is to confuse you about who and what you are. In my book, The True Reality of Sexuality, I actually have a chart which Stewart and I devised on page 168, where we talk about if you're 100% heterosexual, and down here, if that you're asexual, which are some people really have no sexual desire at all, and that doesn't make them wrong or bad, but remember, God mind contains everything. And on either side of the heterosexual, we have the bisexual male, the bisexual female. Then we have what I've called the lesbian female on this side, next to the asexual, and the gay man here, next to the asexual. So we have a variety of sexual preferences. It doesn't make anyone more correct or the other. Again, everything comes from the God mind. Well, the interesting thing that I have been finding out lately, and this is not a new thing, it's just new to me, and it may not be new to you, is something called two spirits. Now, because of my Native American background, which I've spoken to you about that before, I always have kind of my finger on the pulse as best as I can in the position that I am at. And of course, not all Native Americans want to be called Native Americans. I was raised being called an Indian, of course. And now the proper verbiage ranges from First Peoples to First Nations to all kinds of things. So again, I don't know what's appropriate. So I'm doing my best. If I'm offending you, I'm sorry. It's not my intention. The same thing when I start talking about the sexuality. At one time I called people homosexuals, and I was told that wasn't correct. And then I don't really like the term gay and lesbian. So this one actually talks about two spirits. And I like that term. That makes sense to me. And according to my research, it says that many indigenous cultures recognize more than one gender, which is exactly what we wrote about in True Reality of Sexuality. We wrote about the third gender, which, according to the Intersex Society, and I've told you this before, that 1 out of every 100 births there is a baby born whose body differs from that of the standard idea of male or female. And it says 1 to 2 out of every 1,000 of these babies are surgically corrected to fit the conventional standard male-female body type. When a baby is born, the first question that parents are asked is it a boy or a girl? And sometimes the sex cannot be determined even by taking a look at the chromosomes. Well, the indigenous peoples had this covered. And the two spirits actually were revered individuals within the tribe. They often held positions as healers, medicine persons. They were conveyors of oral traditions and songs. They were foretellers of the future. They were conferers of lucky names upon children or adults. They were nurses during war expedition. They were potters, matchmakers, makers of feather regalia, and they often had special roles within the tribes. From Siberia to Samoa, it says in my research that societies were acknowledging 3, 4, 5, and more genders, that the world was not divided into simply male and female. And the Native American culture specifically, this is where I'm getting some of this research, held places of honor for people of integrated genders. So I think that this is really an amazing thing, and it tells me why that people who in our culture we call it gender identity issues. So, and I'm putting that in quotes because I really think those people do know who they are, but society, our society, conventional society today has not had a place, and this is what has created so many issues for genders that do not identify with either male or female. I also was reading that the dress is usually a mixture of traditionally male and traditionally female articles. However, depending upon what the two spirits, what characteristics they displayed, this was decided upon by the tribe and varied from tribe to tribe. So anyway, I just think that this is so interesting, and I have been honored to be able to tell you the story of two women who are clients of mine, who I believe to be two spirits. And the interesting thing is one was born with only one name on the birth certificate, the last name, and the last name started with P. Now the letter P in hyperspace is powerful, and I will tell you this particular female is extremely powerful and extremely gifted. But, you know, she's been left with a lot of issues because she really had only one name at birth and a lot of parental issues. Well, when we take a look at the two spirits in this way, no wonder they are highly programmed, because their spirits are more important to the Illuminati for special ritual purposes. She is now with another female who, interestingly enough, the mother thought was a boy. But a day or two before the mother gave birth, because the baby had been named a male's name, a day or two before the mother gave birth, the mother had a dream where an angel came to her and said that the baby will be a girl and this is the baby's name. And sure enough, the baby was a girl, and the mother named the baby that particular name. And this woman also has, quote, gender identity issues because of what had been thrust upon her. When you think about it, it all makes sense to me. So if you have a chance, I invite you to explore the idea of the two spirits of the indigenous people, where we are going to have more than not just 2 and not just 3, which is the androgyny, but perhaps 4 or 5 or more different gender identities as a natural part of the progression of the evolution of the God mind itself here on this earth. What I want you to be wary of for yourself is not to fall into the trap of having the global handlers define your identity for you. Find it for yourself, and this is one more tool that you can use. So with that said, I have one last thing that I want to share with you, and it's a big one. Because it happens that whenever Stewart leaves, all of a sudden, all kinds of things happen in our life. And I think because whoever's out there begins to bombard us, 16, however many times as much as normal, because when we're apart, they think that we're not as strong, but that's false. We are connected on the inner levels, one spirit, two bodies. We're two spirits, but we each have a body in our particular case. So with that said, I want to address a couple of things. One is copyright infringement, and one is plagiarism. We are thrilled, of course, that you like our work and you want to spread it around. So please do. But we do ask that you credit us as the source. Technically, you are supposed to ask permission before you use it. But I understand that for some of you that's not going to happen. So if that's not going to happen, at least credit the source, which that way our work comes back to us. Now, I had two people on Facebook who were spreading our archetypes around, one incorrectly and one just doing his own thing. And when I nicely asked that they please credit the source, I was called every name in the book. And somebody even had to write to Stewart to tell on me. Well, believe it or not, Stewart and I stand on the same page. We always have, and we always will. We may have had issues because of programming and because of bombardment, but we are married in more than name and paper, which means we stand up for each other and we're in it for the long run. We've been together many lifelines, we will be together many lifelines, and nobody is going to be able to break that apart. With that said, the next thing that happened, unfortunately and fortunately, is I have had over the last few months a variety of things coming across my desk, which highly suggested, and now I have absolute 100% proof, that someone who considered himself a friend, someone who has taken classes from us, someone who has been on our podcast, has actually stolen a lot of our work and credited it as his own. Now, if I were to do classes, let's say, on survival in the wilderness, I wouldn't go take that person's work and change a word here or there and put my name on the bottom. I might say I learned it from this person and this is this person's work and I advocate it, but I am not going to say this is my work. Well, I have a variety of evidences, from written to radio shows to DVDs showing our archetypes, our charts, you name it, it's in this person's repertoire. And a radio show I listened to might as well have had my Decoding Your Life book open and be reading through it and just changing a few words here or there. So anybody that you know that takes my work and Stewart's work and replaces oversoul with words like complete self, or God mind with words like great spirit, if you're reading that, most likely you're reading our work. So this person needs to be reported to the authorities or cease and desist. It is right now in the hands of my attorney, and I have made this known to this particular person. But if you have purchased materials from this person and you recognize it as our work, technically we are entitled to that money that he has, which belongs to us. So I have warned him. He needs to look at his DVDs. He needs to pull out those. He needs to pull out his written work and every single bit of information, which is mine, which often is copied verbatim, and Stewart's, especially Stewart's charts and archetypes, which are being passed off as his, that he claims he gets from some Indian guide. So this reminds me, I wanted to tell you another story while I have your attention, because many years ago I was, I had a very good friend that I trusted, and she wound up going to a spiritualist, which she said this person could make materializations and all kinds of things. And I thought, wow, because my father, as many of you have heard, actually was trained by a spiritualist. And so I thought, I've never been to one of these kind of people, I want to go. Well, I went, of course, I took a couple of friends, and the room got dark, and this person came out, and, there were no materializations. There were things that happened in the dark. There were scarves that were supposedly materialized and given away, but they had tags on them, like made in China. And to me, it was like, oh my God. And this show went on for like I call it a show. It went on for 2 or 3 hours. This person had a lot of quote-unquote proof. And there were people in this presentation that were absolutely mesmerized and would swear, including my very good friend who I trusted, they would swear that this was real. And I even talked to my friend later, and I explained to her, I have to tell you, this stuff isn't real. And she could not figure that one out. To her, it was real. So there are charlatans, frauds, and fakes who will show you things that make you think they're real and they're not. Cuts, bruises, all kinds of things that make you think these people are really ill or they have kind of issues going on and that only you can help them with. That's how they make you feel important while you're still under their control. Now, Stewart and I talk a lot about sexual things because that's the way programming goes in, and that's really the way programming goes out. But we do not touch you, nor do we invite you to touch us. And anybody that touches you sexually or invites you to touch them sexually, you better run the other way. We also don't isolate you from your family. We push you into your family. If you have family issues, we tell you that you need to take a look at these things and you need to work it out. And the only time we really advise you or suggest that you might want to leave is when you're being physically abused or sexually abused, which of course is physical abuse. But we're not counselors, we're not healers, we're people with experience, many decades between us, and that's why you trust us. And that's why we help you with the information that we have, that we use on ourselves. So if somebody wants you to do anything sexual, run the other way. If you want to learn about spirituality, I wouldn't go to somebody who's claiming their expertise is survival in the wilderness. If they're talking to you about their guide, I'd want to know who that guide was. Because when we talk to you about a guide, we talk to you about your source, about your oversoul and God mind, and we give you tools and opportunities to explore that and determine for yourself what's really going on. We don't copy other people's work. We give you our work, which we say comes direct from God mind. Now, some people think that sounds a bit arrogant, but let's look at it this way. If you're a painter, if you're a musician, if you're a writer, if you're a carpenter, whatever you're doing, whatever your profession is or your passion is, you're getting that from your own source. You're not copying it from somebody else, and there are copyright laws in place to protect the years of hard work that you have put into bringing your skills into this reality. The legal laws are here for a reason. And as my father would say, you can break all the human-made laws you want and you can think you're getting away with it. But I will tell you that the spiritual law is really what is your judge in the end. And it is the spiritual law that will break you. So, again, watch out for charlatan, frauds, and fakes who are claiming that their material is mine and Stewart's. I want you to understand that Stewart and I are real people with real issues, giving you real solutions. Don't go to people who are imitating us and let others know, spread the word, because that will help keep our teachings pure the way that it is supposed to be. Thank you so much for your time. I know this has been extra long today, but I've had a lot to say to you. And like I said, just because Stewart and I are physically apart does not mean that we are mentally, emotionally, or spiritually apart. So we can never be taken apart. Remember that. This is Diane Mourglia-Swerdlow for expansions.com. Thank you.